There we go.
All right.
Okay, we're going to get started.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. We have a special guest this afternoon, special guest speaker, who you know, Gigi. And so I'm going to talk a little bit on Mary Magdalene, since it's Easter time. And then Gigi's going to show us a slide presentation of her visit to Magdala and other places. So that will be very interesting for us. So as you know, Mary Magdalene is a person that always comes up in the Easter cycle of readings. Okay, we always hear her in all four Gospels. Her contributions to the ministry of Jesus, her fidelity to Jesus during the crucifixion, and her leadership as an apostolic witness, the first apostolic witness to the resurrection, give her an extremely principal and pivotal role in the foundation of the church. But centuries of people that have depicted her in literature, in art, and in preaching have presented her as a repentant sinner, most likely a prostitute. And we have no evidence of that in Scripture at all, that she was a repentant sinner of prostitution. Now, most likely this happened because I think it was in either the 6th or 7th century, Pope Gregory conflated several New Testament women and put them all together and said they were all the same person. They were all, or the people took it and started thinking that all of these women were the same person. Luke, for example, has an account that I'm sure you've heard of an unnamed woman of the city who dares to enter a private dinner to anoint Jesus' feet with her tears and dry them with her hair. You all know that story from Luke chapter 7. And then Jesus tells her that her sins are forgiven. Then John tells the story of a woman taken in adultery, which most biblical scholars believe was a later addition to the Gospel of John, but it's in the Gospel of John. And then Jesus saves her from being stoned to death by the crowd. John also tells of another woman, Mary of Bethany, the sister of Martha and Lazarus, who anointed Jesus' feet with some costly, fragrant perfume. Mark tells of another woman who is unnamed, who anointed Jesus on the head with precious ointment. So we have all these different women, and then Pope Gregory was really largely responsible for these misunderstandings which have still followed us down through the centuries right up until today. Because he described her as a repentant person who had been a prostitute. This image did a lot to diminish her apostolic authority in the eyes of the church. But in any case, these are all different women that I just described. They're all different. And none of them is Mary Magdalene. So she's another one. She's another one added on to that list of all different women. There are some non-canonical writings, which means that they were not accepted into the canon, but they were writings left that have some very interesting stories. There's the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas. There's all kinds of non-canonical writings that never made it into the Gospel, either because they were written too late, or because they couldn't go back to the apostles, or because they were repetitive of what was already in the canon, or they didn't follow the rule of faith. But there is one story in the Gospel of Mary where the disciples, who are terrified and also upset by the death of Jesus, ask Mary Magdalene, because they know that she was close to him, to explain to them all the things that Jesus had taught her. So she begins teaching them. This is in the Gospel of Mary, until Peter interrupts and says to the others, "Did he really speak privately with a woman and not to us? Are we supposed to listen to her?" You can see why this didn't get into the canon. Okay. And Mary says in the Gospel of Mary, "My brother Peter, do you think I am lying about the Savior? And at this point, another disciple breaks in and says, Peter, you have always been hot-tempered. If the Savior made her worthy, who are you to reject her? So there was certainly a lot of arguing going on about women's role in the church, and many attempts, as we just heard, to try to suppress female leadership. And in spite of the fact that these writings did not get into the canon, the men in the church were pretty successful, right, in suppressing female leadership. So the birth and the home of the woman known as Mary Magdalene is much like other things and places in the Bible. It's shrouded in mystery. Many believe her name identifies the place of her birth as Magdala, near Tiberias. And Gigi will tell us more about that, I'm sure. It's a village on the west shore of the Sea of Galilee at the time of Jesus. The question of who first saw the risen Christ is theologically significant because the early church regarded this first appearance as the manifestation of the primacy of apostolic witness, which is the foundation of the faith of the church. Our faith is founded on the apostles and Jesus. Okay? So it isn't a faith that just started 50 years ago with somebody who said, I have a special message from God. If that message doesn't go back to the apostles and Jesus, we're really not interested. So Mary Magdalene is without any doubt a disciple whose place in the Paschal mystery is attested to by all four Gospels. According to many biblical scholars, there are no grounds for questioning the tradition, attributing the first appearance to her and saying that it is authentic. They all agree. As a matter of fact, since this tradition of Mary Magdalene being the first authentic witness to the resurrection was clearly a challenge to the tradition that was circulating saying that the first appearance was really to Peter, there would have been strong motivation to suppressing the fact that she was the first witness if the evidence had been weak. So the evidence was very strong, and no one could refute it. So John assigns this first appearance to Mary Magdalene. He does not assign any individual appearance at all, first, second, third at all, to Peter. And this is probably an important perspective we have on the role of women in the Christian community of John, which was quite a bit more liberal and more open than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It shows us that at least in John's community, a woman was regarded as the primary witness to the Paschal mystery. Because unlike Peter, she was not unfaithful to Jesus during his passion, and unlike Paul, she never persecuted Christ in his members. But like both Peter and Paul, she saw the risen Lord, received directly from him the mission, the commission really, to preach the gospel, and she carried it out faithfully. Perhaps this is why she's the only woman in the Western Church, except for Mary, the mother of Jesus, to have the Nicene Creed recited on her feast day, precisely because she was considered an apostle. And for Paul, in order to be considered an apostle, you had to have seen the risen Lord and received from him a commission to preach to the others. In Luke says in order to be an apostle, you also had to have accompanied Jesus in his ministry, which even Paul did not do. So by these definitions, Mary Magdalene is definitely an apostle. In the passage describing Mary meeting Jesus in the garden, in John chapter 20, we have three verbs really, describing what Mary Magdalene is doing. First, she's weeping, then she's turning around, and then she's announcing. These are her three missions in this gospel. So at first, she's outside the tomb. She didn't go home when Peter and the beloved disciple left. She stays outside the tomb and she's weeping. She's in desolation because she does not know where Jesus is. And she's so fixated on the loss of the body of Jesus that she does not even register any surprise when she's addressed by the angel. The two angels, one at the head, one at the feet of where the body of Jesus had been. She thinks that his body is his presence. In her mind, Jesus is dead. And that's the last place where she had seen him. And when you are in desolation, as we all know from our own experiences, when you're mourning the loss of a loved one or a special friend, or you're having an experience of extreme painful grief, you cannot see the action of God in your life. You cannot. And we've all been there. We've all been there. You know, you believe intellectually that God is with you, but you cannot see the action of God in your life. We are blinded by our own grief. We're caught in the darkness. So she's in the dark, not only because John says it was very early in the morning while it was still dark. It's also dark within her. And her weeping is a symbol of this darkness. And Jesus asks her, "Whom are you looking for?" These are the first words Jesus speaks as the risen Christ. And they bring us back to the first words he spoke when he began his public ministry in the first chapter of the Gospel of John, when he said to the followers of John the Baptist had sent his followers after him. He said, "Go over there. He's the Lamb of God, not I." And the first words Jesus said to them was, "What are you looking for?" So, and he says now to Mary Magdalene, "Whom are you looking for? What are you searching for? What are you looking for?" So for John, looking for Jesus is one of the marks of discipleship. And even when Jesus addresses her, her grief still blinds her, and she does not recognize him. She has equated Jesus with a corpse, and she's in very deep darkness, so she still weeps. In this garden, Jesus encounters this woman who is symbolically John's community, who is symbolically the church, the new people of God, but she's distraught. And her grief has blinded her and made her incapable of receiving revelation, even when Jesus is standing before her. She doesn't yet know that Jesus has conquered death. So we too have to acknowledge our pain like she did when we have it. We have to focus on it as Mary did. But then Jesus says to her, "Mary," calls her by her name. And that brings about some kind of a conversion. And the gospel says she turns. Now, this probably was a physical turning. Maybe she physically had to turn around in the garden. But it's also a symbolic turning. She's turning her back. She's turning toward Jesus, which means she's turning her back on everything that is behind her. She's turning her back on the synagogue. She's turning her back on Moses as being the final revelation of God. She's turning her back on all her past traditions. And when Jesus speaks her name, that's her conversion, that's her turning. And the turning reverses from looking for Jesus as a corpse to recognizing Jesus as a teacher. And she says to him, "Teacher," in Hebrew, Rabboni. Because now she knows that Jesus is alive and is here. In the first chapter of John, in the prologue, we were told that the law came through Moses, but that grace and truth came through Jesus. In the story of the man born blind, you may remember this, the man born blind says to the Pharisees, "Why are you asking me this so many times? Who gave me sight? Are you also interested in becoming his disciples?" And the Pharisees choose Moses. The blind man who can now see chooses Jesus. His parents, if you remember, they try to remain neutral because they don't want to be thrown out of the synagogue. So in this passage, Mary is a representative of the new Israel and makes the choice that Jesus is her teacher, not Moses. She has turned from grief and sorrow to hope and joy. This idea of turning is central to the narrative of John's gospel. The main concern of John is the revelation of God's glory and our human response of faith, going from darkness to light, going from death to life. People then and now respond to this divine radiance. Even today, we are always making choices. We either turn from darkness to light, or sometimes people turn from light to darkness. Have you ever heard of La Santa Muerte? No. La Santa Muerte is well, literally, I guess it means the holy death. The holy death. And she's personified in the portrait of a woman who lives in darkness, who brings everyone into darkness. And what happens is that people who have no understanding of how God works in their lives turn to her, and good things happen to them. I saw this in the prisons. Actually, it wasn't until after my first year in the prison system that I even believed in an evil spirit. It had never touched my life before. I mean, I always knew that there were people that did evil things and that I committed sins myself, but I never thought of myself as a really evil person that was committed to the devil. It just didn't affect me at all. But after maybe 9 or 10 months in there, and I was in there 40 years, I really could see how the evil spirit works. And one of the ways was through La Santa Muerte. And these young inmates came to me one day, 3 of them, and they said, "We would like you to bring us some literature on La Santa Muerte." And so I said to them, "Well, that's not a Catholic devotion. It's not Catholic devotion." So they explained to me what it was, and they said, "Well, we're Catholic. We're all baptized Catholics." I said, "That's fine, but La Santa Muerte is not a Catholic devotion." And it was in this one particular prison that I worked where I was in charge only of the Catholics. And the poor Dave Robinson, the Protestant guy, he was in charge of everything else. That's how the contract was worked out. The diocese got a little money for what I did for the Catholics, but he got more because he had all kinds of other religions. So I called him up and I said, "Dave, I'm sending these 3 kids to you because," he said, "What is it?" I said, "Well, it's not Catholic." He said, "What is it?" I said, "It's La Santa Muerte." He said, "I don't want anything to do with that group." I said, "Well, I'm sorry, Dave, but this is yours." And so I sent them to him. But before I let them go, I said to them, "Well, since you are baptized Catholics, I can talk to you a little bit about Catholicism, where we believe that Jesus brings the light." "Yeah, but the light doesn't do anything for us." That was there. And my grandmother says that when she started praying to La Santa Muerte, good things happened to her. And I'm thinking to myself, well, this is the evil spirit coming in the guise of good, right? I mean, that's how evil attracts us. We choose it because we think it's a good idea. And then we find out later that it wasn't such a good idea. So I said to them, "Well, maybe your grandmother doesn't understand the light of Jesus, but you do. You're here and you do, and you've been to Catholic services, etc." So I talked to them for a while, and in the end, I said, "Would any of you like to stay with Jesus in the light and give up pursuing La Santa Muerte?" 2 of them did. The 3rd one said, "I'm going to stick with La Santa Muerte." So I said, "Well, then you have to go see Chaplain Robinson, because I can't help you. Our contract doesn't allow it." I said, I can't help you, but Dave Robinson possibly can." But that's the experience that I had with that devotion or whatever it was. Did you have a...
Just trying to understand, this is a belief system?
It's a belief system, yes. And it happens in countries underdeveloped countries, where some people are very poor, like this kid's grandmother, these grandmothers, and the church was doing nothing for them. Or they didn't think the church was doing anything for them. I don't really know all of that because I wasn't in those countries. But they felt that when their perception was that when they prayed to this woman, La Santa Muerte, good things happened. All of a sudden they got food, they got money. So it was a cult. It was a little small cult, but it's still around. It's still around. Okay. But the point is that we all respond to the action of God in our lives either by moving from the darkness to the light in some way, or by moving from the light to the darkness in some way. In Mary's case, Mary Magdalene's case, her coming to faith involves turning on different levels. First, she turned towards suffering and death. Even though she misunderstood and she was looking for a corpse instead of a living being, she started in the right place. She started at the tomb. She recognizes Jesus in his voice, responds with Rabboni, and even the mistakes that she may have made along the way will take her and us to the place where we want to go. Because in the Gospel of John especially, misunderstanding is very important in the struggle for faith. Then Jesus says to her, "Do not touch me." The emphasis in the Greek is on the first word, me. Me, do not touch. Do not continue to touch me. Because in the Gospels, Jesus often touches people. And he's trying to tell Mary Magdalene that dispensation is over. That way of him being present is over. And one of the most serious challenges that Mary had, that we have also to our faith, is our desire to hold on to Jesus and grasp him and define him according to our categories. But to hold on to what we think is the best way is to lose him, because Jesus is not limited to our ideas, and we cannot restrict his freedom. And sometimes we try to do this with human relationships as well, and it usually doesn't work. So the mode of Jesus' presence is changing. That painting that I didn't refer to it yet, but that painting, "Do Not Touch Me," is translated in Latin as "Noli me tangere," and I know you've seen it, right? Where Mary is reaching out in the garden to touch Jesus, and Jesus is he puts his hand out as if to stop her. But during the Second World War, that was one of the paintings in the National Gallery of Art in London. And all those paintings had been scattered throughout the United Kingdom. Some of them were hidden in mines and in many other places during the war. But when the war was ending and the destruction of the land was coming to a close, the director of the National Gallery of Art asked the public which work of art they would like to be brought back first to London. And the overwhelming response was the Noli me tangere. And I think it's because through the years, Mary Magdalene and that painting has been a source of strength and comfort to people who have been devastated by war and sorrow. And the best example I can think of, they didn't have this at the time of the Second World War, but we have the example of September 11th, 2001, when often there was no physical body to mourn. There was no physical body to bury. There was only for many people an empty tomb at ground zero. And Mary is the one who stands by the empty tomb and survives this emotional crisis of monumental proportions. And in the end, she comes away believing. So at a very basic level, this story is about God searching for Mary and his commission to her to proclaim the Easter message. And then the third sign is the sign of announcing. Jesus tells her to go and tell the others, and she does. "I have seen the Lord." And of course, at first they don't believe her. So her announcement, "I have seen the Lord," is the community's call to mission. It's a turning toward others, especially those suffering and people on the margins of our society. So by the time the first Easter ends in this gospel, the promise made in the last discourse of Jesus at the Last Supper has been fulfilled when he said, "I will not leave you orphans. I'm coming to you." And this revelation came to that community as it did to the first disciples, and as it does to us through the word of this woman bearing witness. So she really is symbolically John's community encountering the glorified Savior. And she's the official witness to that community of what God has done for it through Jesus. Does anybody have any questions or comments? I have that picture, Noli Me Tangere, for each of you, if you would like one. And then I'm going to turn the microphone over to Gigi.
Passing that out. She's going.
And even in the picture, in the colors, you can see darkness, but you can also see light. She's in the dark and she's trying to get the light. Artist does that very well. Thanks, Gigi.
Thank you. It's really beautiful.
Isn't that nice?
I've never seen it.
There's a lot of different ones. This one is by Alexander Ivanov. Ivanov. I-V-A-N-O-V. The artist. But there's many different ones.
I-N-O-V.
There's a smaller one in San Francisco, in one of the museums, it's got his head, and Jesus is dressed as a gardener with kind of a blue fluffy straw hat. And it's beautiful, it's only about so big. And Mary is reaching toward him, and he's just, it's absolutely stunning. But it's small.
Cool. Thank you, sister. We always learn so much from her, don't we? It's wonderful to have you. So, a sister asked if I would share a little bit of what we saw when we were on our trip over to Israel in 2018. In October that year, we went. Nancy and Ann went with us, and Lori, who's in the office there, took about 30 people from the parish in this area. And we got to visit ancient Magdala, which is known as a crossroads of Jewish and Christian history. It was only discovered in the year 2009. And it is a crossroads because they found a first century synagogue, Jewish synagogue there. Under just 1 foot of soil is where this was. And I'm going to tell you the story of how that was discovered. It's just an amazing and important discovery for both the Jewish community and the Christian community. They're all very excited about it, but I wanted to start with this quote from Matthew's Gospel because it's just so perfect. Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. So Jesus would have been here. It's just so exciting. And this is a picture from my own camera. This is what we saw when the bus pulled up. The street sign says Magdala, first century Jewish town. Apparently you can park your camel here, you can get a cup of coffee here, and there is a beautiful church here, the Duck in Ultum Church, which is a retreat center that was built. That's the reason they found Magdala, because they were building this retreat center. And Duck in Ultum means put out into the deep. So, next slide. I like to start with a map so we know where in the world we are. So this is a map of, obviously that's the Mediterranean Sea. And you see Egypt down here, Syria up here, Jerusalem in the middle. And the Via Maris, which is the way of the sea, is a name of a coastal path and trade route that connected civilizations. Its beaten dirt roads date back to the Bronze Age, 3000 BC, carried the most beautiful wares and groundbreaking ideas of the ancient ages. So I had to tell you about this because if you follow this line, now the Via Maris goes all the way around the Mediterranean Sea and there's lots of branches off of it. But this one, if you follow the line from Egypt up the coast, it cuts across and it comes right in to, well, it says Tiberias there. It literally comes right in at Magdalene. This is the Sea of Galilee, which is really a lake, the harp-shaped lake, which is Gennesaret, which means harp. So it's just so exciting to me to know that that was an ancient path that was traveled between civilizations, and it came right across from the Mediterranean, across desert, hilly area to the Sea of Galilee. And let's see, I wanted to just start by showing you a few pictures of the sea itself. This is actually my daughter standing on top of Mount Arabel, looking down at the Sea of Galilee. This is the modern day Migdal, city of Magdala or Migdal. Over here, right under here, is the ancient city where they had all the discoveries. And if you're standing on Mount Arabel looking down, this is the road that goes between there. That's the Via Maris today. Here's a view of the lake from the Mount of Beatitudes. We were up there and we had a nice little talk up there, and I really wanted to have a real experience of Jesus. I wanted to walk on a dirt path. So I convinced our group to walk from the Mount of Beatitudes down this hill to the Sea of Galilee. And it happened to be 99 degrees that day, and they were not happy with me at all. But it was stunningly beautiful. If you could get over the heat and the uncomfortableness of yourself, your feet got dusty and dirty. It was Jesus dirt. It was just beautiful. And you can see, I don't know if you can see this, but this is a tent covering banana crops. And so they were growing bananas there. And we came to one place where there was an electrical little fence across the bottom of the path. And our fearless leader, Waleed, was like, what should I do? Luckily, a tractor came by, and the guys on the tractor came over to help, and they took it down so that we could walk across, and we asked, why is that there? And they said, to keep the warthogs out of the banana fields. I just thought, oh dear. I hope we don't run into any warthogs. But anyway, and then this is a picture of, well, there's Anne and Nancy right there, getting their feet wet in the Sea of Galilee. There's just one more shot of that area coming down. It was just absolutely beautiful. The pictures don't really do it justice. Then we went out on a boat, and this is us on a boat. You can see Father Bob sitting there in yellow shirt. He gave a beautiful little guided meditation while we were out there, and this is what our boat looked like. Anyway, it was just spectacularly beautiful. I just wanted to give you an idea of where we were. So back to the story of Magdala. Father Juan Maria Solana, LC, Legionnaire of Christ, felt called by Christ to build a retreat center in Galilee. And his story is really quite amazing. His mother, he's from a large family in Mexico. His mother had gone on a retreat when he was young. And when she came back from the retreat, she was trying to tell the kids the story of what happened to her there. And it all had to do with the story of Mary Magdalene. And at one point, she actually communicated that she heard God say to her the name Mary, although her name's not Mary. But she heard it in her heart, and she felt like this unbelievable love of God. And it changed her life. It was an amazing moment for her. And she tried to tell the kids this story, and they listened, they heard it, but not really. So later in life, when Father Juan decided to go into the priesthood, he left at age 18, entered the seminary, and within that first year, his mom came to visit him, and she said, I need to tell you this story about the retreat, what happened to her. And she explained it to him again, and he heard it in a different way, with new eyes, with new ears. And he always had this story of Mary Magdalene in the back of his mind. It went with him everywhere and never left him. And so, long story short, I gotta make this short, but he was called to the, his superiors called him in and told him they were giving him a new assignment. And he was going to be in charge of the retreat center in Jerusalem, the Notre Dame Retreat Center and Guest House that the Legionnaires of Christ are responsible for in Jerusalem. So he was terrified, number one. He'd never been to Israel, but he went ahead and decided to go forward and do it. And when he got over there, the man he was replacing said, I want to take you up to Galilee and show you around. So he went up, and they're driving up through Tiberias. He was overwhelmed by, like we were when we were on this trip, being in these towns that we've heard about in the scriptures over all these years. Just such an amazing experience. And he said they went past Tiberias and went up to Magdala, and he said, this is Magdala. And Father Juan goes, well, what is here? What's here about Mary Magdalene? He wanted to go see something about her. There's nothing there. Now, we just heard Sister explain to us who Mary Magdalene is. And there's nothing in Magdala, no holy site to visit. And so he was astounded by that. And the guy said to him, all there is here is this dilapidated resort. It's called the Hawaii Beach. And it was literally an old hotel that was deserted on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Hawaii Beach, can you imagine? He was like disgusted. Anyway, they went on up to spend the night in near the Mount of Beatitudes area, and the next morning he got up and watched the sunrise. And he went down and he was watching a fisherman throw his nets into the sea, and he was overwhelmed, and he began to dream about this, that he felt called to have some type of retreat center for pilgrims in the Galilee somewhere, in the Galilee region somewhere. So he dreamt about it, went back and asked his superiors if they could do that, because they had one in Jerusalem, but they had nothing in Galilee. And Jesus' public ministry was in Galilee. So much to his surprise, they said, sure, go ahead, get to work on it. So he had to go to visit the top Franciscan. The Franciscans run all the Christian holy sites in Jerusalem and Israel, and he had to go and talk with him first and tell him what he wanted to do. And he went and he said, can you help me out with this? And this man said to him, yeah, there's one piece of property for sale right now that the Franciscans don't really want to get involved with. Go ahead and buy it if you want to. And it's on the Sea of Galilee. And he goes, oh, well, tell me, what is it? And he said, it's called Hawaii Beach. Astounded again. So to him, this was divine providence. And they bought this piece of property. They raised the money. It came to them. They bought this beautiful piece of property, and they started to dig. And when they started to dig, they unearthed a 1st century synagogue, 1 foot below the ground. It is amazing what they found here. This is just an aerial view of it. And another thing that Father Juan says about this, he explains that most holy sites were destroyed, and then another temple was built there, and then that was destroyed, and something else was built. This site, there's no clutter. It is it. Nothing was built on top of it. So it's one of the most important sites that they've discovered. And they see a real clear picture of how life was in an ancient town from about 50 BC to 60.
But even to think that even the Franciscans didn't want anything to do with Magdalene.
Yeah,
The
right.
first witness to the resurrection.
Exactly. It's astounding, really. It is astounding. So his story was amazing though. So this is the aerial view, and just this little box right here I want you to look at. Can't really see it. I'm going to show you some close-ups of it. That's called the Magdalene stone. It's a stone that they found there. Here's another sort of side view of it. It's the oldest synagogue excavated in Galilee. It's one of 7. Coins from the years 5 to 63 have been discovered there. And it's adorned with color, mosaics, and frescoes. I'll show you a couple more pictures of it, but these are mosaic rugs sort of on the bottom floor of the synagogue. These are obviously columns that have painting, frescoes on them. There's a little one over here you can kind of see. Anyway, next picture. Just another view of it. You can see the mosaic a little better here. This is my daughter, that's Ilsa. These are all people from our group. Anne, I think that's you down there. Nancy, this is you right here. There's another a closer up picture of that fresco piece. It's just amazing what they found. This woman's name is Marcela Zapata-Meza. She is the chief archaeologist on the project, and she tells us inside the synagogue was found this large carved stone block that became known as the Magdalene stone. And this is a quote from her. This ancient stone is one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in Israel's history and features the oldest representation of a menorah ever found. The block was likely carved by someone who had seen the menorah in the temple in Jerusalem, and creating sort of a special connection between the past and the present. So here it is up close. You can see the menorah. It's sort of rectangular. On the short side, you can see that 7-pronged menorah, and it's flanked by 2 large jars and columns. Along the sides are archaeological carvings that give you the feeling of being inside of a synagogue. And on the top is this rosette design with 6 petals, which is seen in other places. I think we saw that also up in Capernaum, that rosette. So the excavation director from Israeli Antiquities Authority referred to this find as exciting and unique, and he said that this is the first menorah to be discovered in a Jewish context that dates to the Second Temple period, the beginning of the early Roman period. We can assume that the engraving that appears on the stone, which the authorities uncovered, was done by an artist who saw the 7-branched menorah with his own eyes, his or her own eyes, in the temple in Jerusalem. The synagogue that was uncovered joins just 6 other synagogues in the world that are known to date to the Second Temple period. So it's really quite amazing. And then to give you an idea of size, there's a man standing next to that case, and inside the case is it's actually a replica of the original stone. I think the original stone is being studied. It might even be in the Met right now. I think I read something about it being here, if you wanted to go and see it. But it's quite amazing, all the artwork. And I'm actually wearing the rosette. I bought the rosette while I was there. And they don't really know what the meaning behind this is, except it has 6 petals here and 6 petals around the outside, and they think it represents the 12 tribes of Israel. Anyway, let's see. They also found, many other things there. They continued to dig, and they found the synagogue. They discovered a marketplace, fishing pools, 4 mikvahs, which are Jewish ritual baths. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but mikvah. And domestic areas, and a wharf and a harbor. So Magdala is unique in the Holy Land because it's a 1st century city where Jewish residents gathered in a synagogue where Jesus visited and taught. It's just amazing what they found. There's a little different view of it, of the dig. This is expansive. This is just one corner of it. And here's a mikvah that they found there. And this picture here from my camera, the guide was telling us is first century plumbing that still works today. There was actually water in there, and they said that they were so good at using the water levels that it's still working today, the plumbing there. Let's see. Oh, sorry. I'm not going to read this all to you. I just wanted to read the last sentence. It just describes the layout of this mikvah area, and it says that the characteristics of these spaces suggest that this is a ritual area dedicated to purification and suggests a higher socioeconomic level and the possibility that these places were occupied by Jewish religious elite. So it was pretty fancy for the time. You can see Mount Arbel up in the background there. Just looking at digs. Whoops, these are live. I didn't mean to skip right past that last one, but that's okay. This is the outside of the church that's built there in a retreat center. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful. As I said, it's called Duck in Ultum, put out into the deep. And when you look into that front door, you can see the cross. I'll show you more close-up pictures, but you can see the cross inside. And this is a boat, which is an altar. And there's a giant window behind it that looks out right onto the Sea of Galilee. But I'll show you an up close. As you go into the door, the first area you come to is called the Women's Atrium. And it has these columns, there's 8 of them, and each column has a different biblical woman's name on it. So this area is it honors the women in the early Christian church. Lori's gone. Lori and I did a little talk in this area about these women, but it's Mary Magdalene, the follower of Jesus and present at his crucifixion. Susanna and Joanna, the wife of Chusa, followers of Jesus. Mary and her sister Martha. Salome and the mother of James and John, supporter of Jesus and wife of Zebedee. Simon Peter's mother-in-law, healed by Jesus, then supporter of Jesus. Mary, the wife of Cleopas, follower of Jesus and present at his crucifixion. Many other women who followed and supported Jesus, and an unmarked pillar for women of all time who love God and live by faith. But I need to read this quote from Luke chapter 8, verses 1 to 3. This is really important for this site because when they were deciding to build here, they prayed about it and tried to figure out what they should focus on. And they read Luke 8 and decided that it really was, they needed to concentrate on Jesus' public ministry. Because Jerusalem, everything there was, all about the passion, death, resurrection of Jesus, as it should be. But there's very little in this area. So, I don't know if I can see that. I'm going to read from Luke chapter 8. Afterward, he journeyed from one town and village to another, preaching and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom of God. Accompanying him were the 12 and some women who had been cured of evil spirits and infirmities. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out. Joanna, the wife of Herod's steward Chusa, Susanna, and many others who provided for them out of their resources. What a beautiful statement. And it's important because when I was listening to Father Juan's little talk on this, he mentions that Mary Magdalene is mentioned 12 times in the scriptures. And 11 of those times, it's around the passion, death, resurrection of Jesus. Only one time is she mentioned during the public ministry, and this is it, in Luke chapter 8. And she's mentioned first as the women who were healed by Jesus and who supported and provided for them. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. This is what the boat chapel, it's called the boat chapel, it actually looks like. And we had mass in here. Absolutely beautiful. And the pictures don't do it justice. I actually have a book here that you can look through if you like to, that has better pictures of it. Here's Father Bob putting our crucifix that's on our altar now. We took with us in every place we had mass. He's putting it up on the altar. And this is a close-up of Mary, Father Bob's sister-in-law who went with us. I just wanted you to see the marble on the floor there. Looks like water. When we did that little talk in the women's atrium, we also called everybody in the group that was with us forward who had the name Mary. And there were a whole bunch of us. And we talked about how hard, like when Sister was talking about the different Marys and how they got confused and conflated, and how easy that, is to have happen. Okay. There are also mosaic chapels. The first one is Mary Magdalene's chapel. That's me, obviously, standing there. I gave a little talk in front of it. But it's, hold on. Where's my thing? I'll go to the next one because I think you can see it a little better. I was really disappointed in the quality. It's too dark. Can't really see it, but, oh, sugar. I gotta go back. Back to here. This mosaic depicts the moment of Mary Magdalene's transforming encounter with Jesus. Her hand is extended towards Jesus, and his finger points at her, and 7 demons are cast out as her other hand rests over her heart. The beautiful written description of this mosaic suggests that we can reflect on the healing power of one look, a look of unconditional love and acceptance. That look, and I quote this from the little description that was given there, penetrates the false fortress of a broken heart and restores peace of mind at the realization of the truth of one's dignity. I just love that. So it says, that look penetrates the false fortress of a broken heart and restores the peace of mind at the realization of the truth of one's dignity. Mary Magdalene had built a fortress around her broken heart, and Jesus healed her and restored her peace of mind in that encounter. Mary realized that she mattered, that she was loved, and that her life as a first-century woman had dignity. Wow, what a moment that could have been for her. Maybe you've experienced a conversion in your life of some sort, conversion or transformation. If anything, it's a recognition of God's unconditional love for you. And it is life-altering. And I think this is the kind of encounter that Mary Magdalene had with Jesus. I feel really bad that you can't see this because it's so beautiful. He's pointing to her. She's reaching out and receiving him. There's 7 demons. You can't see them, but and a snake coming out of her. Her clothing even is sort of ragged, and this is a symbol of the new life, new on top, rags to riches, I guess you could say. And there's palm trees over here. It's Jesus' kingship, and it's all mosaic. It's absolutely stunning. You'll have to take a look at the book before you go. So, in June of 2016, did you say this, sister? A decree entitled, I can't even say it, Apostolorum Apostola, Apostle to the Apostles, where Pope Francis elevated Mary Magdalene's memory. Just in 2016, he did this, recognizing that her role as a first-century witness to Christ's resurrection and as a true and authentic evangelizer. Pope Francis raised the July 22nd memorial of St. Mary Magdalene to a feast in our church's calendar year, an honored position among the celebrated apostles in the church liturgies. Mary Magdalene definitely had some prominence in her day. She was the first one named among those who followed and supported Jesus' ministry. She was healed by Jesus. She was at the foot of the cross when Jesus died. And all 4 gospel stories list Mary as the first one to witness to the resurrection of Jesus, the first one to be commissioned by Christ to go and tell the others, making her the apostle to the apostles. She was a leader and an evangelizer. And on her feast day, I think it's really neat that they chose the first reading to be from the Song of Songs. If you haven't read the Song of Songs, you should go home and read it today. It's not very long, but it's such a beautiful love story poem. And I feel like it describes the relationship that Mary and Jesus had between each other. But any questions? That's sort of my little spiel. Oh, there's one more picture here. This was underneath the boat chapel. There's actual first century marketplace floor there. We all took pictures of our feet walking on the marketplace floor. And it's called the Encounter Chapel, and there's a huge painting or mural of the hemorrhaging woman reaching out and touching Jesus' cloak there. Her hand reaching out. It's huge. It's bigger than this wall. Anyway, forgot that was in there. And this is the last picture. This is our group that went with us. Any questions? Yeah.
Where did that priest, Father Solano,
Uh-huh.
where did he get the money to do all this?
He had to raise it. He had to raise it. He had to raise the money, and when something is divine providence, it just happens. He was able to, many benefactors just came right, gave him the money. They're still, they're still raising money, and they're still doing a lot of work. They're still finding things. And you can go there and you can volunteer to dig or volunteer in the retreat center or be part of it. I really want to do that. I want to go over and spend a month. And it's just a beautiful place. Nancy or Ann, do you have anything to add?
It was an incredible experience. Just in this, the experience was great anyhow, but being in this site, seeing, in a sense, how little they have excavated and how much more
Yeah.
they need to do.
Yeah. It's just amazing that it was only 1 foot underground. And it's in an area that would flood. Over the years it flooded, and it must have been destroyed at one point and then covered by the sea. And then people moved, literally on that map you saw, they just moved a short distance away and rebuilt the city of Magdalene. And it was forgotten. Amazing. Really amazing. Yeah. That has to be one of the prettiest churches I have ever been in as well.
I went with a different group around the same time, and I just found the whole experience transforming.
Yeah.
I really did come back a different person,
Yeah.
just being immersed and being part of Jesus.
Yeah. Exactly. They call it the fifth gospel.
Yeah.
You're living it. You're walking there. You're, feeling it, tasting it, seeing it, touching it.
And it just stays with you. I mean, as you're talking, I'm back there,
Yeah.
and I'm just looking and seeing and smelling, and it's just
Really quite an experience. When I was walking down from the Mount of Arabel, I was walking along and my coat got snagged by just a bush. I walked too close to this bush, and I turned and looked at it, and it had thorns on it that were this big. And I literally, a couple people had to help get me out of it, and I wasn't even that close to it. I was like, wow, look at those thorns. And to think of that being put on his head. It's just amazing what you experience there. It just becomes so real. It is so real, And just to really to elevate the life of Mary Magdalene, who, as Sister pointed out, has just been so confused and overlooked, and I don't know. It's amazing.
It was beautiful, thank you, Jesus.
Oh, you're welcome. I would have loved to have done more. My 3 grandkids left this morning at 5:30 after Easter. So, and I have a little prayer. Should we end with this closing prayer? I don't even remember where I got this, so I can't credit anybody, but I'm going to read it anyway. Jesus Christ, your presence was powerful in the lives of women. You were born of a woman who you honored and obeyed. You revealed yourself to women as the Messiah. You were friends with women. You were welcomed into their homes. Women traveled with you, listened to your words, wept for you, witnessed your death, and proclaimed your resurrection. Lord Jesus, with compassion and power, over and over, you healed women of faith and their loved ones. You expelled demons from the depths of their souls, healed them spiritually by the forgiveness of their sins, and healed them physically, freeing them from bondage of illness and pain. Like the women of the Gospels, we befriend you. We welcome you into our homes. We travel with you, listen to you, weep with you, follow you to the cross, and we witness your empty tomb. We too have experienced your healing touch and the power of your forgiveness. Heal us again, Lord, and strengthen us to proclaim with Mary Magdalene, I have seen the Lord. Amen. Okay. All right. You're welcome. Have a great day, everyone.
That was great, Gigi. Yeah. This is the book you told me about.
Yeah, that is what this church looks like from the back. This is what it looks like on the inside. This is the atrium. You come in the doors, and then you go in through glass doors into the church. And there's a baptismal font. It's all mosaic everywhere. And all these side chapels have their mosaic chapels. And each one is one of the miracles around the sea.
I can't believe that that priest did all this. And he's a visionary.
When I
When you
first
said
heard
that,
that, I was like,
I
oh
said,
boy,
oh,
I'm
no.
in trouble.
But I
You know?
guess he's not in that case.
He is a little bit empty, but he was, he did a good thing. He did a beautiful thing, and he definitely, when you hear him tell the whole story from his own words, he had an experience that God spoke to him clearly and told him to do this, and it just happened. I mean,
That's amazing.
the fact that he asked his superiors and they said,
And
go
they said,
ahead.
just go ahead and do it.
Yeah, the fact that he went to the Franciscan, and the
Yeah.
Franciscan said, yeah, there's
You can have it.
a piece of property down there.
Yeah, yeah.
The fact that first thing
They covered the synagogue. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
amazing experience. And this Magdalene
You have to
stone.
go back.
Oh, I have to.
Yeah, you have to go back.
I did because I was leading that trip. And I couldn't enter into it if I hadn't been leading.
Right,
You know?
right.
So I would love to
Go back on your own.
I just traveled and then around the sea.
Good for you.
It's on my list anyway.
Someday when I come over and you're not here, they'll say, oh, she's in Israel, she's in Galilee. Yeah. Thank you for doing that, Gigi. That was,
That is
That was
also
great.
stunning, and we did a little talk downstairs too, in this encounter chapel, which you're standing on first century stones. Marked
you know,
by stones.
when you said
That's
in
what it looks like.
2016, you said Pope Francis elevated her to her title, apostle to the apostles.
Uh-huh.
But in the early church, she was known as that.
Amazing,
And
right?
then it was suppressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was known
As
as the
that, that's what
apostle
you
of the
said.
apostles in the early church, and to have the Nicene Creed recited on her feast day.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I think they still do.
Yeah. So it's amazing that it's taken this long
This
for
long.
our church to finally, say something about her and give her a little bit of honor about
It's amazing that Jesus had such openness to the ministry of women.
Mhm.
You know,
They were included in his little inner circle. They traveled with
Yes.
him. It's amazing.
Yes, and that it
was wiped out.
and that so many in our church still don't see it.
Right. Right. That's why we have to keep
We have to keep.
passing it on.
Yes, we do. Thank you, Gigi. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.